Every time I want to shoot a video, something weird happens, right? Today I got this antenna, this stupid antenna. I look ridiculous, but it's not about the context, it's about the content, right? So welcome back, creative community. Such a pleasure you joined the show. Once again, this is Lorenzo from the Coach MC Studio, and this is the place where we'll help you actors, performers, entertainers to shape unique behavior deliveries and to get recognized in the audition room. It's just a summer special today. I want to do a slightly different video to help you guys to really perform and be outstanding in a magnificent, authentic, and very impactful way. So smash the like for this value proposition that I got here in store for you guys, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't so far. If you're here for the first time, make sure also to activate the bell so you get notified every time we shoot out a video. And today, performers, entertainers, actors, creative minds out there, we have such an important topic to cover. I know I say this all the time, but this time it's truly like fundamental, existential, because it's about culture and it's about trends. We are not some like monolithic, super grand, a multinational structure that can predict the future, the market, and can send out reviews and test products and have like people reviewing and seeing the products in advance before they even get out to the market, and so they have a pretty good idea what is going on with their services, if their product will be appreciated by the market, by whatever is going on in the environment. No, we don't have that. We are freelancers. We're like this small, crazy, creative community, right? And sometimes we're just actors standing there waiting for our turn to have our audition to get a spot in a great movie and kind of start a new career. What can we do? Because the market to us is anonymous. Sure, we get our pages, we get our sites, we get our slides, we know what to do in the next moment. What shall we do in the next 10 years? What shall we do in the next 20 years, 30 years to come? I mean, we want to be here on the long run. We want to be here for a while. We want to have fun. We want to enjoy ourselves, make some money, and be part of this culture. So when you can predict a trend that it's stemming off a culture, you have a better chance of positioning yourself into a niche where you really belong, where you feel that this is the place where you want to be, where you identify yourself with the product, with the concept, and with the core of this trend, of this niche, with the very pumping heart. And so you will come across as more authentic and more believable and more intertwined with that type of culture, with that type of niche. So knowing the culture, knowing the niche, knowing yourself where you have to position your product, your art, your craftsmanship gives you some sort of an advantage, gives you some time to work on, and specifically you don't find yourself like in this midst of, obfuscated, mystical kind of market. You don't know what the market wants from you. It's not anonymous anymore. Once you kind of identified your culture, your trend, and your niche, it's fundamental to know your past so you don't forget what was going on, so you can measure the future a bit more accurately, and you know in the presence what you have to do. And this is the gift of life, the gift of art, the gift of giving, the gift of communication. So let's dive right into this video and let's see what's cooking. The idea to this video I got a couple of weeks ago. I went to a hip-hop concert from a band called 5 Sterne Deluxe, a great German hip-hop band. We just celebrated, we kind of sang the songs. It was magnificent, right? It was like diving back into history, because prior to that concert a couple of weeks ago, the last time I saw this band was almost 25 years ago in Eastern Germany during a festival. Like 30,000 people were there. It was just humongous and huge. Now it was way smaller and people got older, but the back pain got more severe and more consistent. But nonetheless, it was a fantastic time. For a couple of minutes, we reopened up the hip-hop cultural treasure chest from back in the 2000s, and it was just, wow, immersing yourself with the old songs, the old lyrics, rapping, dancing, looking at the other guys and the girls performing and how they were shaking and moving. It was just great. So I got home totally sweaty, totally destroyed, and I thought to myself, what great time that was, right? The hip-hop culture time, when it was kind of springing off and it was this global phenomenon all of a sudden. I thought, when was it the last time in history that we had something similar to that? Like in terms of its core message, right? A bit of rebellion, freeing the youth, kind of detaching yourself from civilization a little bit and celebrating culture and art, a new way of dancing, a new way of dressing up, a new way of, making music, all that. When was it the last time that you could kind of draw a parallel to that and say that was the same thing? It was pretty close to that. And I got into the 60s. I got into the hippie time, 68, flower power, hippie movement, the revolution, right? Detaching yourself from civilization, coming together as a cultural movement, creating new art, creating new music, a new way of dressing up, of fashion, of identifying yourself sexually differently, consuming illegal substances, creating those mass events. And I thought, wow, yeah, that was pretty close, right? It looks different, right? The code looks different, but underneath we have the same cultural heart. And look at the 60s and look at the hip hop culture from 2000. It kind of created a huge industry, right? Where a lot of trends branching off that core momentum of that pumping cultural heart that were industrialized, commercialized, and then, you know, the revenue got in. And we're talking about big figures here, right? I mean, hip hop generated billions, and of course also the music industry back then in the 60s, the events and generated billions as well. And, you know, we're still having that cultural musical backlash from the 60s today. And hip hop music is still kind of working and backlashing its cultural musical backlash, and it will continue to do so also in the years to come. So that's kind of fascinating. And I thought like, oh, that's like pretty much 40 years ago. Was there anything prior to the 60s, let's say again 40 years ago, that was similar to that? Just to identify this oscillation of culture, just to understand how trends are born, just to understand how we can position ourselves in these times of oscillations and new cultures and new industries that are shooting up. And yes, I mean, Lord and behold, there was the 20s. And the 20s back then here in Europe, but also globally, were a time of, you know, musical revolution. People got together at events. They celebrated the 20s, Art Deco, a new way of creating architecture, art, new artists coming up. You know, we had Cubism kind of migrating into Die Brücke, Expressionism, all these, you know, artists like Braque and Picasso and Klee and Macke, incredible artists kind of revolutionizing art and the way you were perceiving art. The way of dressing up was very different, right? People like dressing up in an incredible way, very smoothly with tuxedos and dancing Charleston. It was very wild, also sexually, consummation of illegal substances. So you see, again, it's the same narrative. And I thought, even though all these cultures identified themselves as being completely unique, it's something unheard of to this point, something that was impossible to replicate. I see that there was like a similar core in all these three different, you know, 40 years oscillations. And then I look back again into the 1880s. And when I think about the 1880s, I think about Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, I think about France, I think about Paris, I think about Montmartre, the wild parties at the Les Chat Noirs, at the Moulin Rouge, and there was this liberty style coming up in art, which is called Jugendstil over here in Europe. And I mean, if you think about Art Deco in the 20s, it was just a revisitation of the Jugendstil of the Belle Epoque art that was coming out of Montmartre in the 1880s. So again, it was kind of the same idea. Behaving yourself a bit more openly, detaching yourself from the civilization, creating a new culture, creating a global movement. Because also back then in the 1880s, like the whole world was flooding into Paris. People and artists from all over the globe were coming into filling up and flooding the streets of Montmartre and of Paris because they wanted to be part of that culture. They wanted to see what was going on there and this new art that everybody was talking about and these wild parties and all this new kind of, you know, thinking about yourself, because we were coming out of the Industrial Revolution. So people needed that catalyst. They needed an exhaust valve. They needed something where they could channel this energy and this, you know, this takeover of civilization over of what was going on prior to, you know, the 19th century. And I thought, this is so fascinating. It's again the same principle, again the same core. It has, of course, a different code around it. It looks different, the language is different, but it had the same impulses, the same views. And out of this culture, a massive trend sprang off. Let's think about Cubism. Let's think about what Paris meant to the, you know, to the world elite of artists all over the globe that was created afterwards. Modigliani, you name it. Picasso, Dali, Ernest Hemingway, they were all in Paris back then. And in Germany, we see Romanticism springing up in the 1880s, again, 40 years prior to the 1920s. And Romanticism was, again, like a similar movement, right? A bit quieter, a bit more severe, a bit more earnest, but, you know, the core essence was, again, it was the same, you know, going back to nature, you know, coming together as a cultural group. It was a phenomenon. People were dressing up differently. They were detaching themselves from civilization. The Wandervögel, so the wandering birds, were created. A group of people from all over Europe kind of just traveling like the Irish traveling folks back then, just throughout Europe, enjoying nature. And it was always this idea that we need to get back, right? We need to remind ourselves. We need to get rid of the amnesia that is built, you know, around us by civilization. We need to feel culture again, and fill it up with new ideas, new colors, new expressions, new musical styles and all that. So you can see I could do this like forever. So the sense of me rambling through history like that is just to show you the narrative, that there is a 40-year pattern and oscillation that comes back where we are revisiting some old symbols, metaphors, elements, and we're getting back to a core principle of what culture should be. It's like culture lives for 40 years and then kind of dies off, and then it has to kind of re-pop up again in order to kind of survive. Every time it gets modified slightly, but the core message is always the same. So what will the future look like? What kind of trends do we have to expect from 2040? If we kind of adopt this 40-year cycle that I came up with, what will happen in 2080? Is there a super technological revolution coming up, unfolding in front of our eyes that will take over pretty much every aspect of our life? And will we have like a counter movement to that in 2080? Who knows? But it seems like that there is this need for culture every 40 years, and that culture kind of creates a market. And now we're coming back to what I said in the intro. This is the market that I'm talking about. If you analyze culture and understand the trend that stems off that culture, you have a market you can position yourself in. And all of a sudden, this thing, being an actor or being a creative mind or an artist, doesn't seem so blurry as a definition anymore. It doesn't seem so detached from the actual working employment anymore. It doesn't seem like, okay, I'm an artist, now I'm waiting for employment. No, I'm an artist, part of a culture, and I will surely find a method to kind of channel my energy, channel my craftsmanship, and put it at work. At work to solve a problem for that specific niche, for that specific trend, for that specific culture, to create a service for that culture, to be part of that culture in order to create an infrastructure to let that structure grow even bigger, to promotionalize that structure, to get into work for that culture and with that culture, to promote that culture. There are many, many, many applications to that. And the same thing is true for us actors. I mean, think about us being actors, growing up and going to drama school and reading the first plays and having the first monologues going on. We don't know what type of style we belong to. We don't really know what type of market is out there for us. We don't even know how to position ourselves. Do you understand where you need to participate? Do you understand what type of project this is? Do you have a real idea what kind of culture it is you're gonna have the exchange with, right? We need to collaborate, we need to communicate, we need to be present, we need to demonstrate, we need to replicate. And that is way easier if you know the culture, if you've studied, if you have done your homework, if you know where this is all going, and if you know what the audience, the market, the niche is actually looking for. Because now you're not working alongside the market or around the market or just completely opposite to the market. Now you're working with the market, which is less fatigue, it has more efficiency, and you use less energy to probably produce a better outcome. So, creative community. I guess that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it because it's such a vital part of being an artist is the culture. And sometimes I have the feeling that we kind of neglect where we're coming from and what culture actually means and where acting comes from. I mean, it's a tradition that's thousands of years old. The ancestors of the ancestors of the ancestors of the ancestors of our grandfathers, they used to be actors somewhere showing the people what God's intention was, right? It's such a mystical, old and supreme craftsmanship. It's such a beautiful work to have an interpretation, an inner interpretation about something that happens outside of you and kind of merging the outside field with the inside field into a performance, into a body that can be perceived, can be watched. That's the magnificent part of culture. And as long as the culture lives inside of ourselves, it lives also in our character. That doesn't mean that you need to streamline every character you're producing, in order to cater it so you're pandering to the culture that is in right now. It means that you, right now, with your camera, with your cell phone, with your computer, and with your spirit and with your workforce, with your labor, you have the immense opportunity to look out for a niche that just belongs to you. Isn't that great? That's an opportunity that wasn't there 40 years ago. And now we have it. We can have our market created alongside ourselves, with ourselves, and where we can profit finally from something that we can clearly identify with because we know where it's coming from. We know where it's going, and so in the present we know what we need to produce. See you next time. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Follow me also on Instagram where it's the Coach MC. And if you got something crazy in mind, you know what I mean? Like in terms of creating a great project, shooting a show reel. Maybe there's a rebrand of your company coming up. You're looking for a new marketing strategy. You're looking for spicing up your delivery, your communicational skills. There's a big presentation that needs to be kind of reinforced with authentic, powerful, and worthy skills. Just do it right now. Write me a nice email. It's thecoachmc.studio, and let's see what we can do all together to create something amazing. See you next time. Don't forget to activate the bell, right? I'm just saying. And with the next video. Now you're ready to perform. And now it's time for me to put a hat because I can't stand this antenna anymore.